Hi everyone. Today we're going to start with slope-intercept form. Okay, so when you open your foldable, the top says identify the slope and the y-intercept in each of the graphs below. Compare it to the equation of the line. What do you notice? So I'm going to look at my first graph, and I need us to remember that with slope, we're going to find our rise over our run. Okay, so this graph does give me 2 points. So I'm going to draw that right triangle to help me count my rise and my run. And then I can see I go 1, 2, 3. And those 3 are in the up direction, so that's a positive 3. And then for my run, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's 5 to the right. And I know on my coordinate grid, when I go to the right, that's a positive. So for my slope of this graph, my rise is going to be positive 3 over positive 5. And then I need to find my y-intercept. And we need to remember that our y-intercept is where the graph crosses the y-axis. So here's my y-axis. Okay, here's my y-axis. And I can see that my graph is going through that y-axis right here. So that's at -1, -2. So 0, -2. So my y-intercept is -2. Okay. Now when I look at my graph, I can see that my slope 3/5 is the letter that's touching my x, 3/5 x. And I can see that my y-intercept, that -2, comes at the end after the x, right, in my equation. So I'm just going to try the process with the second one and see if it matches up with my equation just like it did here on the first one. So I'm going to do my rise over run. And again, I'm just going to draw my right triangle, use those arrows to help me determine my slope. And I'm going 1, 2, 3 in the up direction. So that's going to be a positive 3. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those 6 are to the left. And I know that when I go to the left in my coordinate grid, those are negative numbers. All right. So my slope is going to be positive 3. So if I did rise over run, it would be positive 3 over -6. But I know that I can simplify that. I can divide both of these numbers by 3. And when I simplify that, that does give me a slope of 1 over 2 negative. Okay, so slope will be -1/2. And I'm going to find my y-intercept again. So I'm going to see where this graph crosses that y-axis. Okay, so looking at that, I can see that it's right here, and that's at the coordinate 0, +1, 2, 3. So my y-intercept would be a +3. So when I compare these two, I do see that my slope still comes right before the x, and my y-intercept comes here after the 3, or after the x. Okay, let's go ahead and keep comparing. Now on this one, on 3 and 4, we're going to see if we can write our equations, okay? This one doesn't give us the equation, so we're going to see if we can write them. Now on this graph, I have a lot of different points. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick these 2 right here to draw my right triangle. And that would give me 1, 2, and I went up, so +2, and then over to the left 1, so that's going to be a negative 1. So rise over run would be positive 2 over negative 1. And when I simplify that or I divide that out, I will get a negative 2. But I do want to show you that if I were to choose different points and not two that go right in a row, so I'm going to come and I'm going to make a larger triangle. And I'm going to see if I get the same slope, okay? So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 going up, so positive 8. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 to the left, so negative 4. So for my blue triangle, that would be positive 8 divided by negative 4, which simplifies to the same of negative 2. So I just wanted to show you that these are the same slope. No matter how big or small, they reduce to the same one, okay? So I can go ahead and in my blank, I can say the slope is going to be negative 2. And when I find my y-intercept, I'm going to see where this graph crosses this y-axis. And I can see here, it's going to cross exactly on this point. And that would be the coordinate 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So my y-intercept would be 4. And when I put this together, if I look back at my top examples, it was y equals. So I'm going to put y equals, maybe not. Y equals. Then it was my slope and then the x. So my slope is negative 2 and then the x. And then I put my y-intercept. So here I have a positive 4, so I'll put plus 4. So now my equation matches my graph. So on number 4, we actually have a table. We don't have a graph, but we can still find our slope. Remember, on a table, we're not going to use rise over run as our slope. We're going to do change in y over change in x. So my change in y, to go from 3 to 1, I'm going to subtract 2. And then to go from 2 to 3, I'm going to add 1. So my change in y is a negative 2. And my change in x is a positive 1. So this was for my slope. So my slope of this table, when I simplify negative 2 divided by 1, I get negative 2. So now when I go to find my y-intercept, if I look at my previous 3 examples, every time I found my y-intercept, it was the coordinate 0 and then the number it crossed at. 0 and then the number it crossed at. 0 and then the number it crossed at. So what I need is I need to get 0 in my x column, okay? So instead of adding 1, I'm going to go backwards. So if I go from 2 and I go backwards and I subtract 1 because I'm going backwards, that would give me 1. So I have to do it again so that I can get to 0. Okay? So now I'm going to go backwards and I'm going to, instead of subtracting 2, I'm going to add 2. So 3 plus 2 gives me 5. And then if I add another 2, 5 plus 2 will give me 7. So for my y-intercept, I have my coordinate 0, 7. So this 7 is going to be my y-intercept. So I'm going to make my equation, and I have y equals slope was -2, and then my x, and my y-intercept is here at 0, +7, so I'm going to put +7. Okay. So now let's move on. And now we're going to graph equations given the, we're going to graph the slope, we're going to graph the line when we're given the equation. All right, so we have 3 steps to do that. So when they give you the equation, the first thing I would like you to do is to plot the y-intercept. Okay, so here's our first example. We're going to do the steps and do this together. So step 1 is to plot the y-intercept. So if we look back at our previous examples, the number after the x is my y-intercept. So on my y-axis, I'm going to plot my -1. Okay, that's how I'm going to start. So then for step 2, we're going to use the slope to create another point. So I can see in my equation that my slope is 2/3. Now, remember that we said with a graph, slope is rise over run. So my 2 is positive and my 3 is positive. So that tells me +2 for my rise is on my y-axis. So I'm going to go up 2. And then 3 positives would go to the right. So 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then step 3 is going to be to connect the dots. And that's going to give me my line. Okay. So there we go. We now have our graph that follows the equation y equals 2/3 x minus 1. Okay. Now, this formula, slope-intercept form, is on your formula chart. It says y equals mx plus b. So we need to remember, going off our examples, we know that the slope comes first and it's what's connected to our x. So the letter m is our slope and the letter b is our y-intercept. All right, so if you see M, it's asking for slope, and if you see B, it's asking for your y-intercept. All right, so now we're going to do a couple more problems to see if we can identify our slope and our y-intercept. So given this graph, I'm going to find my slope. I need to do my rise over run. So I'm going to draw going up and going over. So that's 1 up, so +1. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. And these 4 are going to the right, so that's going to be a +4. So to do my rise over run, I'm going up 1, so +1. To the right 4, so +4. And my slope will be a +1/4. So next for my y-intercept, I'm going to see where it crosses that y-axis. And I can see that it's crossing at 0, -1, -2, -3. So my y-intercept will be this -3. And that's going to help me with my equation because we said that's going to be y equals 1/4 x minus 3. So for number 2, we do have another table. And we need to remember that we can't do rise over run on the table. We're going to need to do change in y over change in x. So I can see that to go from -3.5 to -2, we're going to add 1.5. Okay, and I'm just going to check myself in case I'm not quite sure. So -3.5 plus 1.5, and that does give me -2. Okay, so my change in y is going to be plus 1.5. And then to go from -2 to 0, I'm going to add 2. So for this table, I am going to simplify 1.5 divided by 2. So 1.5 divided by 2, and that gives me 0.75. So my slope is 0.75. And then I need to go find my y-intercept. Now this table is different because it does have 0 in the x column already. Okay, so we didn't have to go find it. It was already there. So my y-intercept is going to be -2. Because remember, our y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis, and it gives us a coordinate where x is 0. So then for my slope-intercept form, y equals m, or that slope, 0.75 x, and then my y-intercept is my b, so I'm going to put -2. So for my next examples, we are going to use our 3 steps to see if we can graph. So if we remember, step 1 is to plot our y-intercept. So this -4 is going to be my y-intercept. So 0, -1, -2, -3, -4. And then step 2 is to use my slope and create another point. So my slope is 1 as my rise and 3 as my run. 1 is a positive, so I'm going to go up. And 3 is a positive, so I'm going to go to the right. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So now I actually need to make this a line. So I will connect my dots. There we go. So I'm going to let you try example number 2 and see if you can get yours to look like mine. So on this one, to start with step 1, we're going to plot our y-intercept. So I'm going to plot my +3. So I'm going to go 0, 1, 2, 3. Now for this problem, my slope is a whole number, or not a whole number, but it's not a fraction that looks like rise over run, okay? So I'm going to take that -5 and make it my numerator. And in order to get -5 as my answer when I simplify, I'm going to put a 1 under it. Because if I did -5 divided by 1, it would still equal -5. And I'll prove that to you. -5 divided by 1, it gives me -5. Okay, so that's what I need it to be in my equation. Now, because my 5 is a negative, that means I'm going to go down 5. That negative tells me to go down 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then my run is positive, so I'm going to go over 1. So I'm going to connect my dots. And there's my graph. Okay, for the last two, number 3 and number 4, I would like you to try them on your own. All right, guys, so check number 3 and see if yours looks like mine. Now, my x was completely by itself, but I knew that an imaginary 1 went there, and that told me what my rise and my run were going to be. Okay, and now if you check your number 4, there's nothing after the 3x, and so the number that means nothing is 0, so that lets me know that my y-intercept is going to be 0, 0 in this case. Good job. Please make sure your foldable is completely filled out, and have a good day.